The Hegemony Council convened an emergency session for the third time in as many cycles, their bioluminescent forms flickering with distress patterns that had become all too familiar. Chancellor Vexthul of the Crystalline Dominion spoke first, his voice resonating through the chamber's translation matrix. The agricultural collapse has reached critical mass. 73% of habitable worlds have reported complete crop failure. The quantum plague has consumed our molecular farms, our hydroponics arrays, even our synthetic nutrient processors. Ambassador Kelnara of the Hive Collective added her chittering voice to the discourse. Our breeding chambers can no longer sustain reproduction. The young starve before maturation. We estimate total species extinction within 2 standard years. Across the galaxy, the same story repeated itself. The Void-Touched had watched their energy-based sustenance sources wither. The Aquatic Federation's kelp forests turned to ash in their vast oceans. Even the mighty machine consciousness found their mineral extraction operations failing, as the quantum plague consumed the very atoms they needed to survive. It had started small, a peculiar form of entropic decay that seemed to target any organized matter used for sustenance. Scientists called it a quantum plague, a cascading failure of fundamental forces that spread from system to system like wildfire. Within a decade, it had consumed 3 galaxies. Now it threatened everything. Perhaps, came a new voice, electronically synthesized yet somehow warm. We might offer assistance. The council chamber fell silent. The speaker was human, a species so young that many delegates had never encountered one before. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood barely 5 feet tall, her brown skin unmarked by the biomodifications common among spacefaring races. She looked impossibly fragile compared to the towering crystal beings and chitinous warriors around her. With respect, human, Chancellor Vexthul's tone carried barely concealed disdain. Your species has existed for mere millennia. What could you possibly offer that our combined civilizations, some millions of years old, cannot provide? Sarah smiled, the expression somehow familiar to every delegate despite their vastly different anatomies. Seeds, she said simply. And steel. The Hive Collective's representative let out what could only be described as bitter laughter. Seeds? We have genetic templates for every crop species that ever existed. We have quantum-engineered superfoods that can grow in any environment, all consumed by the plague. Ah, Sarah nodded. But have you tried dirt? The question hung in the chamber's recycled atmosphere like an accusation. Explain, demanded the Void-Touched delegate, their form shifting with curiosity. Sarah activated a holographic display. Images of Earth filled the space above the council table. Not the gleaming ecumenopolis that was standard for advanced worlds, but something else entirely. Vast stretches of brown earth, green plants swaying in natural wind, creatures that moved without technological assistance. While you built upward and inward, optimizing every system for maximum efficiency, we stayed close to our roots. We never stopped using soil, actual dirt teeming with microorganisms. We never fully abandoned traditional agriculture, even as we colonized the stars. The delegates leaned forward, their attention captured despite themselves. The quantum plague targets organized artificial systems, Sarah continued. It feeds on the quantum entanglement that makes your advanced agriculture possible. But dirt isn't organized. It's chaos. Billions of microorganisms competing, cooperating, dying, and being reborn every second. The plague can't get a foothold because there's nothing stable to attack. Impossible, whispered Ambassador Kelnara. Primitive agriculture cannot feed populations in the trillions. You're right, Sarah agreed, which is where the steel comes in. The display shifted, showing massive human vessels emerging from hyperspace jumps around devastated worlds. But these weren't warships or colonization fleets. They were farms, kilometer-long agricultural vessels carrying not just seeds and soil but entire ecosystems. We've been preparing for this possibility for 2 centuries, Sarah explained. Ever since our scientists detected the first signs of quantum decay. While you built bigger and more efficient food systems, we built ships that could carry Earth itself to the stars. The images showed something unprecedented. Humans working alongside alien populations, teaching them to work with soil instead of against it. Crystalline beings learning to nurture bacterial colonies. Machine intelligences calculating optimal crop rotations. Aquatic species adapting their vast underwater cities to accommodate kelp farms that grew in actual seawater. not synthetic nutrient baths. But the complexity, protested Chancellor Vexthul. The inefficiency. The mess. Exactly, Sarah grinned. Chaos is antithetical to quantum organization. The plague can't consume what it can't understand. And it can't understand natural systems because they're not systematic. They're alive. Within months, human agricultural fleets were seeding worlds across 3 galaxies. Ancient trade routes became supply lines for compost and earthworms. Worlds that had known only sterile perfection learned the chaotic beauty of nature's resilience. The learning curve was steep. Entire species had to relearn concepts their ancestors had abandoned eons ago. The proud crystalline dominion, whose geometric perfection was legendary, struggled to accept the asymmetrical chaos of natural growth. The machine consciousness found themselves writing poetry about the unpredictability of weather patterns. But it worked. More than worked, it flourished. Yields were lower than the artificial systems had produced, but they were stable, sustainable, immune to the quantum plague that had devastated a dozen galaxies. 5 years later, Ambassador Sarah Chen stood before the Hegemony Council again, but this time in a very different chamber. The sterile metal and crystal had been replaced with living walls, actual plants growing in actual soil, filtering the air and providing food directly to the delegates. "The famine is over," she announced to applause that rippled across species lines. "But more importantly, it won't happen again. You've learned what we never forgot, that the most advanced technology is often the oldest." Chancellor Vexthul, his crystalline form now hosting a small garden of climbing vines, spoke with something approaching humility. "We owe you a debt we can never repay, humans." Sarah's smile remained unchanged, warm, familiar, utterly human. "No debt necessary. We've learned as much from you as you have from us. After all, who taught us how to build ships that could carry forest between stars?" In the years that followed, the galaxy remembered the Great Famine as the event that taught them an invaluable lesson. Sometimes the most primitive solution is the most sophisticated, and sometimes you have to look backward to move forward. The humans, with their seeds and steel, their dirt and determination, had shown them that survival wasn't about perfection. It was about resilience. And in quiet moments, when delegates from advanced civilizations watched their children play in actual grass under actual sunlight, they understood that perhaps the youngest species in the galaxy had been the wisest all along.